10% who are really skilled at using American Sign Language. So there are people from all over the country who are saying, let's go to Gallaudet, it's this Mecca, and they get there and they're faced with teachers and faculty who don't sign well either. Maryland School for the Deaf, which isn't too far from here, and the Northern California School for the Deaf, it's in Fremont, California, are considered radical schools in the deaf world because probably a good 50% of the teachers are deaf, and their students in both of these places are doing very well. The Council for, I think it's called the Council for American Instructors, Council for American Instructors of the Deaf, CAID, has a conference, and they're saying that there still is not enough evidence that deaf teachers can work better with deaf kids, that we need more evidence still. And it's a joke in this day and age. So I know that I've touched on a lot of different things, but basically what I would like to leave you with is that there is an overlap with the deaf community, and at the same time, the deaf community is really a linguistic and cultural minority that does, because of the language and cultural differences with the wider society, but also faces the accessibility barriers and the civil rights barriers that have been talked about. We have to beg for much of what we want in the society, and we're looked upon in a very negative light in most ways. So there's a real conflict with how much do you stay within your own community and how much do you get out there in the world and work within the disability community for accessibility for everybody. So I would be happy to answer more questions at the end, but I think I get to stop, and thank you, Anais.
Hi, my name is Gail Taylor, and I'm with the School of the Americas Watch Anti-Oppression Working Group. And there are a few different people in the room from our working group, so I was just wondering if people want to stand up and say who you are, and even if you want to come up and say a few words. First, I want to talk a little bit about what our working group does in general. Was Elliot here? I thought it was Sarah. No. He was, okay.
I'm Sasha.
I'm Allie.
Sure.
I'm Sasha.
I guess we are included in part of this workshop because I'm going to talk a little bit about how the SOA Watch Anti-Oppression Working Group attempted to make our vigil and demonstration more accessible to people who have disabilities, as well as to people who are linguistic minorities, I guess, to hearing impaired and people who don't speak English. But first I just want to do a little bit of background.
Can I just stop you for 1 minute?
Yes.
Hearing impaired is a very offensive term, and I know you didn't know.
No.
But if you can use deaf and hard of hearing,
Okay.
that would be great.
There are going to be a lot of disclaimers in this because we come to this not as disability rights activists. We come to this as activists who realize that our activities are not accessible for many people, and so we're trying very hard. So School of the Americas Watch is an organization that has, for a little over 10 years, been working to close the School of the Americas. It's an Army training institute in Fort Benning, Georgia, where the U.S. government has been training about 60,000 soldiers in combat training and counterinsurgency warfare since 1946. But the school came to Georgia in 1984. And in the late 80s, particularly in the Christian, but really the Catholic community in this country, started to gather there at the base every November to protest the school and to be a presence. In the mid-90s, the movement began to grow exponentially, particularly after the Pentagon was forced to release information that they had used 7 manuals that advocated the use of torture and extortion, blackmail, and different things to neutralize the enemy, as they would say, especially in Central America in the 80s, but all throughout Latin America. So that's sort of the core and the base of our movement is really in the Catholic community, people who were missionaries in Latin America and that sort of thing. By 1998, 1999, and into 2000, and even into this last November, our gathering in Georgia is about 10,000 people. So it's a lot of people, and it creates a lot of issues. When you start talking about issues of oppression and access issues, first I want to talk about the oppression issues because that's how our working group first started. One of the main things is that our movement is essentially very Catholic-based, very Christian-based, but also very white middle-class-based. I would say at least half, if not more than half of the 10,000 people are white middle-class Christians. In the late 90s, the movement began to bring more and more people into it, particularly anarchist folks, a little bit more increase in people of color, a little bit of increase in participation of Latinos, but for the most part, if for anybody who went to Georgia this year, you would look and you would think this is a gathering of white people in a southern city that was, very much a place where the civil rights movement passed through in Georgia. So we ourselves, not only do we want to talk about why that is, we want to not have a movement that doesn't feel like people can be included, or that people want to stay away because they say that's a white Christian thing and I'm not a white Christian, so it's not my thing. On top of that, the Anti-Oppression Working Group is also concerned with just basic issues of oppression within our own organizing, sexism, homophobia, classism, all different kinds of things that all so-called social justice movements have had to face, even the civil rights movement, of course. So we're sort of a subset of the SOA Watch movement that, number one, wants our movement to be inside ourselves even more supportive and more inclusive of each other, but also to the outside world. We want people to feel like if they want to come and support the cause, that we are open to them, and we want them to feel like they can come and participate in the events. I didn't say this at the beginning, but I'm an able-bodied person, and most of the ways that we were able to try to make the vigil this year more accessible was people who have disabilities and gave us free advice, and even despite all of our faults and everything that happened, really helped us and made a lot of the connections for us. So there's actually one person in our anti-oppression working group who has a disability, and she unfortunately couldn't be here today, but she was actually a main person who helped us make connections with people. And then there's also a woman who is hearing impaired and in a wheelchair and has been coming to the protest for 8 years. And she, I'm sorry, I did it again.
Yes, I'm here.
She's been coming to the protest for 8 years and also helped us a lot. So I just want to go through a list of some of the things that we did or that we tried to do, and then I'll talk about some feedback that we got and some places where we need to do better and hope to do better next year. What we did. Every year, the event happens on a Saturday and a Sunday, and we have programs for each days. Until this year, they were always printed in English, and just printed in English. So this was the first year that we had the programs translated into Spanish, and we had large print programs, and we had Braille programs. We also have a sign interpreter. This is something that we have had in years past. A woman who comes and stands on the stage and interprets for almost the entire length of the programmed vigil on Saturday and Sunday by herself. And she's a volunteer. This year we wanted to create a space where people who need to sit down at some point during the 7 hours, or what is a long time, or people in wheelchairs can be at a place where they can see people on the stage and not have 10,000 or 5,000 people standing in front of them blocking their view. But we didn't want to have a roped off area. We sort of had the same philosophy